Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 5 in the discourse Tzion b'mishpat Tipadeh 5672, which is the 11th discourse in the great big book B'Shah She'Hekdimu 5672. And this is class number 3 in chapter 42. Okay. So yesterday we were continuing the idea and the exploration of why Chachma, wisdom, is essentially higher than Bina. Not only that there's more light in Chachma, but it's an incomplete different experience. And even on the lowest levels of Chachma, remember we were differentiated between the vision of Chachma, which not everybody, only very, 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 very powerful minds experience the experience of Riyah of Chachma, especially in the divine. But I guess this applies not only to the divine, but any subject. Super, super, super deep minds can experience the Riyah, the vision of Chachma. To most people, Chachma is more of an intellectual experience, not so much a Riyah. Intellect, a vision is completely above intellect, completely above the realm of the intelligence and the logic and so forth. It's experience above and beyond. However, even on the lower levels of Chachma, which is a taking something in, and that has already a relationship to the beginning of the intellectual process, yet even over there, we learned, and this is the main point over here, the essence of the Chachma is still a truth making its way in and presenting itself, or as he uses the word, it lays down in the consciousness. It sets. I think a good word would be it sets itself into the person's mind, but it's not even the slightest bit of grasping coming from the person's intelligence. That's not there, and therefore it's still, in a sense, above seichel. Not in a sense, it is above seichel. And this that we say that Chachma is passes on to Bina, and the Chachma gives over the kernel of the idea to the Bina, and the Bina then develops it. That misses out on this hanacha sichlis, of this entrance of the truth as it enters into the person's mind in its with its substance. The mind has the ability, still in the Chachma state, to create a very vague and general, what we might say, somewhat of an intellectual kind of a description to it. But that is a very chitzoniistic element of it, meaning external, and that's what Bina is nibbling on. Or maybe not even nibbling, gnashing on, or maybe not only gnashing, but actually feasting on. But it's not on the soul of it, on the essence of it, always of the hanacha sichlis, like he called it yesterday, of the inlay of the idea, remains aloof and above the Bina experience. And last thing, we were learning how we find that yesterday we gave the whole story of the Arizal, how in his vision would take him 80 years to explain it. But that was to explain that, here's the thing, that was to explain that when you do have this experience, when you do have the hanacha sichlis, that helps the seichel shabai, the hanacha sichlis, which is the inlay of the idea as it enters in, that in its purity above intellect, that truth then shines and illuminates the mind as well. And then later, the external element of the Chachma is able to clarify the Bina as well, for the Bina to have a full grasp on the subject. And that's why we were bringing the story of the Ari, in which he says he would have 80 years of classes, 80 years of teaching for what he experienced in that vision in one nap, Shabbos afternoon, that he took a nap and he had that vision. So although by the Arizal this was a higher state, this was a Riyah, this was not an intellectual type of an experience. Even the Hanacha Sichlis, this was above the Hanacha Sichlis. This was a Riyah, like we spoke earlier about Rav, who had a Riyah. He was able to see it. It was a vision. Yet even over there, it's not like he says, okay, I saw that and I will never be able to say anything. He says, I have 80 years of discussion. Now, as we said yesterday, the 80 years of discussion and teaching will never capture what he saw. But there's still a brilliance and an illumination and a clarity. And what's going to happen is from the Riyah, it's going to produce, as we learned yesterday, Neviah Sichlius. It's going to send the brainstorming element of the mind, where the mind is brainstorming intellectual ideas. It's going to send it into overdrive because you've now taken in such a powerful mind illumination. And that's going to set the brain, it's going to elevate the mind, the more intellectual capacity of the mind, to a whole new level. And then that is such a high level that it's 80 years of translation into Bina, and as a result of the Bina into speech and into communication, 80 years. But this was to further bring forth the idea that the even though an experience is essentially above the Bina, it still can shine into it. And he applies the same thing to the Hanacha Sichlis, like we learned yesterday. And that's the reason why that the Hanacha Sichlis, even though the Hanacha Sichlis, which means the lower element of the Chachma, where the idea settles into the mind above understanding, which is usually, as we discussed yesterday, the brainstorm or the epiphany, although the essence of it never gets chewed upon in the Bina, but it still can illuminate and light up the Bina experience. And the last point that we learned was that this lower state of Chachma, which is essentially above and above above the experience of Bina, he says is something that we find by great minds, although they're not the super minds to be able to have a vision of something. Many deep concepts, very deep concepts, that they have that they do not have the ability to put into intellectual words. They don't have the ability to be able to communicate them, yet they accept certain truths as truths. And it's not just because they're blindly accepting it. These are intellectual people. It's because these are such deep entities. It can show itself and settle and set itself into the mind in the pnimius of this chachma, in the inner dimension of chachma, but it's too deep for it to make the connection into the seichel of the chachma and via that into the bina. Meaning the idea that we said earlier that the Arizal says that for 80 years I would have what to speak. Well, okay, and that would be very tough for the Arizal, in the sense to take even the chitzonius of the chachma, translate that into a language. It could be successful, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it remains hovering in the chachma. Okay. But all of this, again, is to help us understand how the difference between chachma and bina is not just in quantity. This is the inner point that I'm grasping as a point. And therefore, there's a whole lot of light in the point. Because it's the entire concentrated idea all in one point. Then the point becomes, diffused, or it becomes, it loses its potency, because once you start dissecting it and you're getting into the details, you're not focusing on the entire picture. You're focusing only on a part of it, and you lose some of that brightness. He's saying it's not that. It's completely fundamentally different. And all of this, you have to always remember, because we can't lose the forest for the trees, is as we are examining these details, this is all because he's trying to show us how the Or Pnimi, which is the light of the Kav, comes in a manner of, it begins already with Esespherois, Hagnuzais, hidden. And although in the earlier stages, you don't even see the differences between them, they're completely part of the Or Ein Sof. But when the Kav then translates these Eser Nekudais, we're still going to come back and make the connections to what we were learning earlier. I'm just doing it very briefly. When the Kav, which illuminates only via the Tzimtzum, what that does is it causes that the Kav should be able to come out as a line, and a line is like 10 dots. That's a line, a bunch of Nekudais, which already is setting the dots with higher dots and lower dots, which means the Esespheres are lining up as higher and lower. It's not only the Esespheres, it's the entire system of Seder Ishtalshalus, of the order of evolution, where the Kav passes through level after level, setting the stage for a higher and a lower, and gradations within the entire system. And here is where he's developing the idea that there are essential, fundamental differences between Sphira and Sphira. Okay, so this is taking it back to its original Nakuda. Okay, and remember, in this chapter, then, as he's going to conclude this idea, I'm not in this chapter, in this discourse, in next discourse, he's going to conclude the entire discussion about the Or Pnimi, about the internal light, and he's going to swing back to the Or Makif, to the encompassing light in the Or Ein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum, which is what the Mimer began with, to discuss the crowns that were given by Har Sinai. So we're inching closer to the completion of this grand thought that it's one thought that he's basically teaching us in all of these. For us, it's been already 200 and close to 20 classes. All right. And now, based on all of this, we will understand this that we say that Chachma is called the higher Das. Is a common idea in Hasidus, in mysticism, that says that there are two perspectives, Das Elyon and Das Tacht, the higher Das and the lower Das. What's the difference between these two deos? It's all taken from a pasuk from a verse in Samuel, when Hannah says, "Kikel deos Hashem," that God is a God of das, of deos, of opinions, of perspectives, and it implies a plural perspective. So it says fundamentally, all of existence can be divided in two categories of perception. There is the perception from above, and there is the perception from below. The perception from above is God's perspective. And as we're going to see, that perspective illuminates to a certain, throughout the entire range of the divine, to a certain point, and at a certain point, it cuts off. And from that point then onward is called the lower das, the perspective of below. What does that mean? The higher perspective is that God knows that he exists and that his existence is absolute reality. And he is the true being. How about creation? How about the world? How about heaven and earth, trees, stones, oceans, people, Wall Street, whatever you can imagine, money, all these things, everything that all the entire reality that is not God, that he's creating, is absolutely nothing. Not that it doesn't exist, that he didn't create it, he created it, but it has no substance to it to be even called something. It is so flimsy, it is so, on a simple level, it can't even exist for a split second. Only if Hashem is imparting existence into it. So it's not a real existence. It's ayin. It's nothing. And add to that what is God investing into it? A crumb of a crumb of a crumb of a nothing, of a ray, not even of any of the substance of who he really is. So it's really nothing. That's the perspective from above. Then there is a perspective from below. What's the perspective of below? On the simplest level is the way we feel ourselves as very, very real, as very substantial, as very important. And therefore, our issues and our matters and what is going on in our life is top priority because we take ourselves very seriously. And then there is, of course, we recognize that there is a God and a creator of the universe. And we know on some level that he's far more real than we are. But it's still, because we are living in the block and where we've never seen the substance of God. And we've seen all the time and space and everything in the world. So these elements of creation are more real to us. And we call the world Yesh, something. And we call Hashem ayin, nothing. Not that we, God forbid, deny his existence, but it's like a nothing existence. It doesn't have the concreteness. It doesn't have that immediance, the powerful presence of beingness. And that can lead us a lot of times that the need of Hashem can be on the back burner when it competes with the need that we feel in our own existence. I need money today. I need breakfast. I need to eat. I need to be comfortable. After I'm comfortable, I can daven. After I'm comfortable, after I take care of myself, I can take care of what I got. Now, it's not to blame on us. As the verse says in Perek Ein kamach, ein Torah. You see that the Mishnah concedes to that. If there is no food, there is no Torah. If you're hungry and you don't know where you're going to eat, it's hard. But the very idea that it's hard because we feel ourselves as like, first let me take care of myself, let me make sure I'm okay, and then I can think about God, means that if our eyes would be open and we would see that God's reality, so if God has a need, then that would be of greater importance right now. And it's not like we ignore our needs, but that can be like, I'll take care of that in a minute from now. Let's first do what Hashem wants. So you're just giving a little example of the concept of the higher das and the lower das. For example, tzaddikim, great tzaddikim, we say that in their souls shines the higher das. To them, God's so real, he's more realer, if you can use a weird word, than they are to themselves. And therefore, the first priority of the day, when they wake up in the morning, like the first thought and the bugging thought and the drive that they had till late afternoon before they can even begin to stop a second and think, hey, what's with my business? What's with my life? Did I take care? Do I have? Did I? They can't. They don't. It's an afterthought because first they're so busy with all the stuff that God needs. That's tzaddikim. Because to them, the Yesh Amiti, it's not just they're righteous, they're good people. It's a different consciousness, different reality. The Eibishter is real. So these are all, so we can really say that the Das Elyon and the Das Tachten is relative in each level, in everybody's world, even in your world, in my world, in our consciousness. We can have moments when we experience the Das Elyon, like on Shabbos, we can have clarity that God is running the world, and he's more important. His bracha, for instance, for our businesses, for our well-being. Prayer is the most important thing. If I pray and I speak to God, that's like 99.9 my businesses are taken care of because God is the real reality. Now I also need to do one or two things of Hashem wants me to work b'derech hateva, to do one or two things naturally as well to assure a good outcome. But if for whatever reason I got caught up with a mitzvah, or for whatever reason the hishtadlos, the thing that I did is not so perfect, doesn't bother me too much, because as long as I know that Hashem is bestowing the blessing, I know everything is going to be good. And a lot of times we have that clarity. But then a lot of times we go into a state of darkness and we feel very much that the natural nature and how things look in the world of nature, what the doctor says, what the experts say, and financial experts, and so on and so forth, that becomes more substantial to me or to a person than Hashem's blessing and than the mitzvah. And therefore, what can bring a person to cut corners, as we say on the mitzvahs, because they feel that they have to take care of their business, they have to take care of the natural elements to improve their livelihood, as opposed to first take care of the main business. Make sure that God is that your main partner, which is Hashem, He's happy, because when He's happy, everything will already work out. But we know in ourselves that at times we have that clarity, and times we don't have that clarity. So we can see that we go through these fluctuations of higher das and lower das. In general, during prayer, we're supposed to be in das elyon, in the higher das. Especially when we say the pasuk Shema Yisroel Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. At that moment, it's supposed to be so clear to us that God is the only reality, it's not but Him. And we can understand that these two perspectives can exist in every world and in every level and fluctuate up and down depending where you are, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, it says that the higher das is in the world of Atzilus, because the world of Atzilus is a world of divine. So in the divine realm, it knows with absolute clarity that God is and there's none but Him. And from Bria, from the world of creation already, it doesn't have that. They feel themselves enough that God is the creator of the universe, but the universe is still the universe. So there is already a das tachte. Some places it's explained, and this is where he's explaining over here, that even in Atzilus itself, from Bina and downward is considered the lower das. It's only in Chachma of Atzilus, which is the first sphera of Atzilus, that's where the higher das is manifest. Because in Chachma is receiving the ultimate truth of truth that God is, and there is none but Him. In Bina, it's a little clouded already. It's a little clouded. Based on what we learned in this discourse, we can understand. In Bina does not know the Or Ein Sof. Bina has never tasted the Or Ein Sof as it really is. Doesn't have an intimate knowledge of Or Ein Sof. Bina has a description, and about it, and it has the most expansive description and elaborative understanding of Or Ein Sof. It can teach like billions of years of exciting things about the Or Ein Sof. But it didn't meet the Or Ein Sof in a very open, conspicuous way. And that's why the Bina itself is still, has not, only when the Or Ein Sof literally fills your space, when the Or Ein, then you really get it, that besides God, nothing exists. And all the worlds are absolutely nothing. We were saying earlier that on Shabbos, we a lot of times are elevated to higher das. Why is it that on Shabbos, we are elevated to a higher das? Because it says that Shabbos is called Shabbos Kodesh. Kodesh is Chachma. We're going to learn about it soon. And when Chachma is present, there's none but Him. And basically, this is going back to what we were learning a little while ago, how when you experience Chachma, you don't have to have a vow. Remember, we were learning just a little in the end of the previous discourse, that vows are coming from Bina, not from Chachma. What's a vow? A vow is when you're feeling that the material world, when you're trying to eat, and you want to eat in a godly way, by knowing that the only reason you're eating is because of the godliness that's in the food, and you want to connect to it, and not for the taste, and not for the enjoyment. So when you're realizing you can't do that because the food, the physical temptation is too strong, you make a vow. But on Shabbos we learned, what did we learn earlier? And on Shabbos is no problem. Shabbos you can eat and even enjoy the food, and it's still holy. And the reason is because Shabbos is the illumination of Chachma. And Chachma, in Chachma shines the ultimate truth. And since in Chachma shines the ultimate truth, then everything is God. And so if you're feeling pleasure, the pleasure is the divine. There's nothing but God. The whole distraction that things can feel, there can be a sense of otherness, that comes when Chachma disappears, when you don't have that clarity, when Chachma is not shining. So this is the same idea that we're learning, and now let's read it inside. V'zeu, and this is the meaning, Shachachma b'chinas das elyon. That Chachma is the higher das. V'hainu. And that is because Chachma, that in Chachma, meir oirin soif, the oirin sof, even in the lower level of Chachma, in Riyah, in the vision of Chachma, the higher levels of Chachma, in the Chabad of Chachma, where over there it's in the Chachma of Chachma for sure, but even in the Chabad of Chachma, and perhaps even in the Midos of Chachma, we learned the Riyah arrives, like the vision of Chachma. For sure, there is a full identification with the Or Ein Sof. It's like when you're seeing something, that truth fills your every fiber of your being. But even in the lower levels of Chachma, in the Yasod element of Chachma that we learned earlier, which is already the Sichli of Chachma, which is already the intellectual element of Chachma, the epiphany, the brainstorming element of Chachma, that is already in a level of intelligence. Even over there, the light is not dimmed. It's the truth as the truth is, not a description of it. And for that reason, it's receiving, it experience Or Ein Sof for how the Or Ein Sof truly is. And then you know that he is the Yesh Amiti. He is the real being. He is, and there's none but him. In Chachma, the Or Ein Sof, the true being shines. Which is the essence. This is the real Yesh. And therefore, in Chachma it knows the ultimate truth that anything that's not him is ayin, is nothing. But here he translates even more. When we say Umasha Lamata and what is below, that the Das Elya means that Masha Lamayla, what is above, which is the Or Ein Sof, is Yesh, he is the real being. Umasha Lamata, anything that's below the Or Ein Sof, which means a recipient of the Or Ein Sof, but a product of the produced by the Or Ein Sof, but not the Or Ein Sof itself, is ayin. That's how we usually understand. Here he says, Umasha Lamata, and what is below, which means what Chachma is transmitting to Bina. In other words, the boundaries of the Yesh Amiti, of the true being manifesting himself in a revealed way, is Chachma. Below Chachma, as Chachma is already passing on this information, this knowledge to Bina, Chachma is not transmitting it. Remember we said the essence of the Hanacha Sichlis, the essence of it, as its experience as Chachma, never goes over to Bina. And therefore what Bina is getting is just what we say Pshatlach. Bina is getting a whole bunch of words and descriptions. And therefore that entire description about the Or Ein Sof, that's ayin, that's all nothing. It's a ray, it's a little insignificant reflection of God. There's nothing substantial there. In Chachma is where there's substance of Hashem. Umasha Lamata, and that which is below, Hainu Masha Baba Saga, anything that could be translated in grasping, the entire experience of intellectualized grasping of Hashem, no matter on how lofty it is, it's not the substance, and therefore it's ayin, it's nothing. Shazeh b'chinas ha'ara lavad is only a ray. Harei ze b'chinas ayin, that's in a state of nothingness. The kelo chashiv kamei, it's considered naught before it. Chachma is not considered naught because in Chachma is one. Chachma becomes completely included in the Yesh Amiti, in the true being. The Yesh Amiti manifests in Chachma. So Chachma is called, we were learning earlier that Chachma is called Ayin and Bina is called Yesh, something. That's from the Das Tachten, that's in our world. But from God's world, it's the opposite. Chachma is the Yesh Amiti, is the real being, and Bina is Ayin, is nothing. Now, in the parentheses, he's going to say, okay, we're going to leave the parentheses for tomorrow. Let's skip a little bit so that we can flow the conclusion of this thought. But when Chachma then continues to influence and gives life to Bina, so what the Chachma, so then two things. What Chachma gives Bina is nothingness. That's number one. Number two, when Bina that receives that nothingness looks up to Chachma, Bina realizes that it's not getting Chachma at all. So Bina looks at Chachma and Bina says, Chachma is ayin, is nothing. I don't get it. It's above me. So two things. First of all, to Chachma, what Chachma is giving to Bina is nothing, because it's not passing on the substance of the Or Ein Sof. So it's nothing. But Bina, when Bina looks up to Chachma and Bina is receiving, Bina realizes that what it's getting from Chachma is only an offshoot, an ayin, and therefore it realizes that the real yesh that Chachma has, it doesn't have. So to Bina, Chachma is called ayin, it's called nothing. Bina knows it's getting a whole bunch of words. It's getting a bunch of words from Chachma. It's not getting the substance of Chachma. So Chachma is remaining elusive to Bina, and therefore that is ayin. The masha musag bebina, this that the Bina is grasping, is only the external. The ainu hasichli, it's only the intellectualism shebenekudas haskala that's in that point. Avala hanacha, but the main inlay, which is the essence of the shebenekudas haskala that's in that point, that remains hidden from Bina, and Bina says, it's nothing. I don't know what that is. It's above me. Over here, it means ayin, means it's concealed from Bina. It's not grasped in the Bina. Nevertheless, zehu ikar hamakar v'hasiba la'asaga de Bina. The main source for the Bina is not the outer crust of Chachma, is the illumination, is the inlay of Chachma, the pnimius of Chachma. So we said earlier, because there is that essence, presence of the essence of the idea that's in Chachma. Although Chachma cannot translate that into words, but that is the main oomph of whatever Bina will later have, although Bina is not grasping it, but that has to be present for the seichel of Chachma, which is the external of Chachma, to be present, to be able to, that there should be a seichel there, and that seichel should go over to the Bina for Bina to be able to chew on something. Ukenel, as we said earlier, the main power is given from that hanacha sichlius. It gives koyach ba'asaga in the grasp. Let's learn the second parenthesis, because I want to conclude one thought. The be'emes, because in truth, he says in the second parenthesis, again, I skipped the first parenthesis over here. We're just going to, the be'emes in truth, bekol haskala chadasha, in every new seichel, kamoy shehi benekudas haskala, as it is in every new epiphany, in every brainstorm, as it is in that nekuda, ikra, the main part of it is b'chinas ha'anacha, is that inlay. V'hu dafka sibas hasichli v'hasaga. The nucleus of it is not the logic of it, but it is the cause of that outer substance of seichel, which then later becomes the material that Bina is able to have hasaga in, is able to have a grasp in. Now that's true in every chachma Bina experience, in every innovation, in every creative experience. The essence of it is above the intellect, and that's the primary power of it, and that empowers the entire thing. And that's true everywhere. But particularly when do you sense it? Not in every case does a person see that. A lot of times, when a person's creative level is not so deep, or when a person is hanging out on the more external level of their own intellect, they're not really working very deep, So even though they're brainstorming and coming up, but it's a more superficial type of a brainstorm, over there you don't feel it that much. You don't feel that there's something here that is hovering above your intellect. It feels like, okay, it's a point, and then the point right away is dissected. There isn't this. However, it's not so detectable. This idea that, but when you're really learning something very, very deeply, and you're racking your brain at something for a long time, and you come to a very deep understanding, that's when you sense that that maybe 85% of the experience is really above. It's just a certain truth that's present in your head. It is more recognizable by some deep and innermost revelation of seichel, like we said earlier. Okay. Tomorrow we're going to go back to the parentheses, and as we can continue Be'ezras Hashem.